The Oralis drifted like a silver cathedral through the silence of the void, proud, perfect, and dying. Deep in the ship's heart, systems flickered. Circuits bled light. The Zinara engineers, tall, crystalline beings of flawless grace, whispered in anxious tones. Their technology had never failed before, until now. When the emergency beacon reached Earth, no one expected help to arrive in the form of a single human mechanic. But that was all they could send. His name was Eli Rowan, an Earth-born repair engineer with a stubborn streak and a heart too big for his own good. When Eli first stepped onto the landing bay, the aliens stared in silence. He wasn't like them. No bioluminescent markings, no elegant composure. Just a grease-stained jumpsuit, messy brown hair, and a small pack of handmade tools that looked laughably primitive beside Zinaran instruments. The captain's voice cut through the murmurs. "This human is our solution?" Before anyone could answer, Princess Seraphine Zenar, daughter of the High Sovereign, descended the ramp. Her silver gown shimmered with faint starlight. Her eyes, bright as amethyst, met his. "You are from the planet called Earth?" she asked, her tone precise, curious, not unkind. "Yes, ma'am," Eli said, glancing around at the towering alien crew. "You said your ship's core is failing. I'll need access to the central lattice and your last diagnostic report." A few engineers exchanged puzzled looks. His voice was calm, too calm. No awe, no fear, no hesitation. Seraphine tilted her head slightly. "You intend to fix a Zinaran core alone?" He shrugged, already unpacking his kit. "If it's broken, it can be fixed. Doesn't matter where it came from." The princess's aide, Alira, let out a quiet, crystalline laugh. "Your species is known for arrogance. Now I see why." Eli looked up, smiling faintly. "Not arrogance, hope. We're kind of addicted to it." The crew led him to the heart of the Oralis, the luminal core, a radiant sphere surrounded by humming conduits and pulsing threads of energy. Even through the glass, its light looked unstable, flickering like a candle in the wind. Seraphine stood beside him. "This ship is the crown of our empire. If the core collapses, we lose not only our fleet but every colony within 3 sectors. We've tried every equation. Nothing holds." Eli pressed his palm to the barrier glass. He didn't flinch from the heat. "Maybe that's the problem," he murmured. "You're trying to calculate it. Machines like this, and they're not just math. They breathe. They listen." Seraphine frowned. "You speak of metal as if it has a soul." "Maybe it does," he said quietly. "At least enough of one to respond when you care." For the first time, the princess was silent, not out of superiority but confusion. No one had ever spoken of machines that way. Eli knelt, opening his toolkit. "Give me 7 cycles," he said simply. "I'll keep her alive." 7 cycles, Seraphine echoed. "And if you fail?" He looked up at her, eyes steady and kind. "Then I'll fail trying. That's what humans do best." That night, the corridors of the Oralis whispered with new stories, of the strange human who treated wires like wounded friends, who smiled at sparks and hummed softly while touching the cold heart of alien perfection. In her private chamber, Seraphine found herself replaying his words. "Machines breathe," he'd said. "They listen." She looked out at the galaxy stretching before her, endless and luminous. And for the first time in her long, ordered life, the princess of 1,000 stars felt something small, human, and deeply unsettling, curiosity mixed with wonder. And somewhere in the humming dark of the engine bay, Eli Rowan whispered to the dying core, "Don't worry, old girl. We're gonna fix this. You and me." The ship seemed to pulse, once, in reply. The corridors of the Oralis had never echoed with such unusual sounds before. The clinking of old metal tools, the low hum of a human voice singing softly, and laughter where silence once ruled. Eli had turned the pristine engineering deck into something alive. He worked without fear, crawling into ducts that no Zinaran dared to enter, sleeves rolled up, eyes sharp. He didn't rely on scanners or automated repair drones. Instead, he touched every conduit with his bare hands, listened to the hums and flickers, and somehow understood. From the observation deck above, Princess Seraphine watched him with growing fascination. The human's movements were unrefined, almost chaotic, yet there was a strange grace to them, a rhythm born from instinct rather than design. She'd never seen anyone treat technology as though it were alive. Beside her, Alira, her aide, crossed her slender arms. He's reckless, Your Highness. Look, he's rerouting current without a neural shield. That would kill his inner Ran. Seraphine's lips curved slightly, and yet it does not kill him. Why? Perhaps his biology is inconveniently stubborn, Alira muttered. Eli suddenly called out from below. Hey, could someone hand me a plasma coupler? The small one with 3 prongs, not the shiny toy version. Alira frowned. Toy? That's a Class 10 quantum relay. Seraphine descended the stairway, her gown gleaming faintly in the artificial light. She picked up the tool and held it out. You mean this? Eli blinked up at her, surprised. Yeah, that's the one. Thanks, Princess, she tilted her head. You call me that so easily. Among my people, names are sacred. He grinned. Where I come from, calling someone princess usually means you trust them to listen. Her eyes glimmered, half curiosity, half amusement. Do you trust me, human? He paused, then nodded. If I didn't, I wouldn't be fixing your ship. For a long moment, the hum of the engines was the only sound between them. Then Seraphine did something that startled everyone in the chamber. She knelt beside him. The crew gasped. A princess had never lowered herself into the grime of the ship's mechanics. What are you doing? Alira exclaimed. Seraphine's voice was calm. Learning. Together they studied the glowing core readouts. Eli explained with gestures, drawing lines in the air. See this pulse pattern? It's out of sync with the power grid. You're forcing the system to run perfectly. But nothing lives perfectly. You've got to let it breathe. Let it breathe. Seraphine echoed. Yeah, he said softly. Even stars pulse. Hearts skip. Maybe your ship needs a little room to be imperfect. She watched his hands move. Steady, deliberate, warm. It was strange how alive his gestures felt. The Zinara spoke with stillness. Humans spoke with motion. Everything about him seemed in motion. By the 3rd cycle, word had spread through the ship. Crew members would pause at corridor corners just to glimpse the human who joked with the princess, who worked through nights without rest, who sometimes sang to the engines. Late one evening, Seraphine lingered again by the glass dome overlooking the core. Eli was below, a silhouette surrounded by sparks. The lights danced across his skin, casting him in molten gold. He looked up suddenly, catching her gaze through the barrier. You're still watching me, he said through the comms, smiling faintly. Her voice carried a note of curiosity. You are different from what I expected. How so? You work as though the ship is alive, and you speak as though you are speaking to a friend. Maybe I am, he replied, tightening a bolt. Machines don't betray you when you care for them. She hesitated. You trust metal more than people? He laughed softly. No, Princess. But metal doesn't lie. It just breaks, and that's easier to fix. Seraphine's expression softened. There was something in his voice, a sadness she didn't understand. When he finished his shift, she asked one last question. Eli, when you fix something broken, what do you feel? He looked up at her, his brown eyes reflecting the silver light of the reactor. Hope, he said simply. Because if something can be repaired, maybe people can too. That night, as the ship drifted silently through the dark, Seraphine found herself awake, replaying those words in her mind. Maybe people can too, and for the first time in her long, logical life, she wondered if her heart, flawless, untouched, mechanical, had begun to crack just enough to let something warm inside. By the 5th cycle, the Oralis had grown quieter, not with calm, but with fear. The once steady hum of the ship's heart had turned erratic, pulsing in uneven waves. Readings spiked and fell, systems blinked off, and an invisible tension gripped the corridors like a shadow. Eli stood in the reactor chamber, staring at the luminal core, the radiant sphere that kept half the galaxy alive. Now it trembled, light cracking like glass under pressure. He exhaled slowly. She's not holding, Princess. From the observation deck above, Princess Seraphine looked down at him, her elegant face unreadable, though her hands were clenched tighter than protocol would ever allow. Our calculations are flawless, she said, almost defensively. The power load should be stable. Eli looked up, voice calm but urgent. That's the problem. You're treating her like math. She's running out of balance, not numbers. Alira, her aide, snapped from beside her. Human nonsense. The readings are screaming, Eli interrupted, pointing to the display. You see those fluctuations? That's a feedback collapse. If she breaches, this entire fleet will melt into a supernova trail. For the first time, silence fell among the crew. Even Alira had no words. Seraphine's voice dropped to a whisper. How long until detonation? Eli didn't answer immediately. He wiped the sweat from his brow and checked again. An hour, maybe less. Gasps rippled through the control room. The princess turned sharply to her crew. Evacuate the lower decks. Get every civilian to the escape pods, and you? Asked Alira. Seraphine's violet eyes locked on Eli. I will remain until the last system falls. Then you'll die with it, Eli said, climbing up the maintenance ladder toward her. That's not leadership. That's giving up. She met him halfway, anger and confusion flashing across her features. You presume to tell me what leadership is? I'm telling you what living is, he said, steady but soft. And right now living means fighting for this ship with everything we've got. The room shook violently. The light from the reactor flared crimson. A warning alarm blared through the halls. Eli didn't hesitate. He ran toward the core. Seal the chamber, he shouted. If this thing blows, the blast will tear through the decks, Seraphine's voice cracked. You'll be trapped. He looked back once, offering a faint, crooked smile. Then make sure it's worth it. Before she could protest, the heavy doors slid shut, locking him inside. Through the glass, she watched as he moved fast, faster than any Zinneran had ever seen a human move. His hands blurred, cables sparking around him, light scorching his skin. He didn't stop. Core temperature exceeding tolerance, cried an officer. Override the sequence, Seraphine shouted. Alira shook her head. He's disconnected the command line. It's all manual now. Inside, the world had turned to fire. The core screamed with a light so bright it hurt to look at. Eli tore open a fusion channel, his hands shaking but his heart steady. Come on, he whispered to the machine. You're stronger than this. Breathe. The reading surged, stabilizing for a moment, then faltered again. Sweat poured down his face. He ripped out his final tool, a simple Earth-made clamp, and jammed it into the conduit. A blinding wave of light burst through the chamber. The ship trembled, then sunk. The alarms faded. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the reactor pulsed. Slow, steady, alive. Seraphine exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. He did it, she whispered. The chamber doors hissed open, smoke rolling out. Eli stumbled through, coughing. His jumpsuit scorched, his hands blistered. Seraphine rushed forward, catching him before he fell. Her perfect composure broke as she knelt beside him. You reckless fool, she whispered, voice trembling. You risked everything. He looked up at her, half smiling through exhaustion. Didn't risk it. Invested it. In what? She asked softly. In something worth saving. For the first time in her life, Princess Seraphine couldn't speak. Around them, the alien crew, beings of perfection and logic, bowed their heads in silent awe before the battered human who had done what no machine, no algorithm could. Eli Rowan, the small man from a small planet, had saved the pride of the stars. And somewhere deep inside her, beneath duty, discipline, and the unyielding shine of royal protocol, Seraphine felt something fragile spark to life. It wasn't admiration. It wasn't gratitude. It was something older, wilder, and far more dangerous. Hope. The Aralis floated once again in the tranquil dark of space, wounded, but alive. Its hum was softer now, almost like a heartbeat. Eli's repairs had held, saving them all. Yet what lingered in the air was more than gratitude. It was wonder. In the days that followed, the crew treated him differently. Exinarans, who once kept their distance, now watched him with open curiosity. He was no longer the primitive. He was the human who silenced a dying star. But Eli didn't act like a hero. He went back to work as if nothing had changed, tightening bolts, adjusting coolant lines, and cleaning soot from his tools. When asked why he didn't rest, he simply said, if something's working, it still needs care. You can't just walk away when it's fine. That's how it breaks again. Princess Seraphine found herself drawn to the maintenance deck more often. At first, she told herself it was duty, that she was observing the alien technician's methods for future reports. But she stayed longer than duty required. One evening, she found him sitting by the viewport, gazing at the stars with a half-eaten ration bar in his hand. Don't your people ever stop moving? She asked gently. He smiled without turning. Only when we're dreaming. Or dead. She hesitated before sitting beside him. For a long moment, they just watched the stars together, the endless ocean of light stretching far beyond either of their worlds. You know, Eli said after a while. Where I come from, people look up at the sky and dream about what's out here. They build ships, write songs, fall in love under those same stars, and sometimes they fight because they forget they're all looking at the same thing. Seraphine tilted her head. You dream? Even knowing you're small? He chuckled. Especially because we're small. It's what makes dreaming worth it. Her gaze softened. We were taught that emotion clouds judgment, that feelings are flaws, but you wear them as though they protect you. Maybe they do, he said simply. Our hearts break, but that's how we grow. Every scar is just a lesson that stuck. For the first time in her long, ordered life, Seraphine didn't have an answer. His words were simple, yet they struck something deep, like an old chord she hadn't known existed. That night, she couldn't sleep. She replayed the human's voice in her mind, soft and grounded. Our hearts break, but that's how we grow. The next day, she joined him again, this time at the main control junction. He was knee-deep in cables, muttering to himself. Need a hand? She asked. He blinked in surprise, wiping sweat from his forehead. Sure, if you don't mind getting a little dirty, princess. I've already walked through fire with you, she said with a faint smile. I think a little dust won't harm me. They worked side by side, her delicate hands learning clumsily at first, then with growing rhythm. Eli guided her patiently, never laughing at her mistakes. When she accidentally crossed a wire and a spark leapt out, she jumped back, startled. Easy, Eli said, gently taking her hand to steady it. The trick isn't to fight the current, just guide it where it wants to go. His touch was warm, rough, human. Seraphine felt her pulse quicken. Zinarans didn't feel heat that way. Didn't notice texture, but she did now. Your skin, she murmured without thinking. It feels alive, he smiled softly. So does yours. You just forgot what it means. She didn't let go of his hand immediately. Neither of them spoke, but something shifted. Something quiet and irreversible. Over the next few cycles, their conversations deepened. He told her about Earth, oceans, laughter, rain. She shared stories of Zinara, order, harmony, and silence. They were two beings from opposite ends of creation, yet somehow their words filled the same empty spaces. Once, Seraphine asked, Eli, if you could go home, would you? He thought for a long time before answering. Home isn't always where you start. Sometimes it's where someone finally understands you. Her breath caught. No one had ever spoken to her that way. Not as royalty, not as perfection, but as a person. That evening, when she looked out into the stars, she didn't see infinite cold anymore. She saw warmth, fragile, fleeting, but real. And though she would never admit it aloud, she realized something profound. Humanity wasn't weakness. It was a kind of strength her world had forgotten how to feel. Peace rarely lasts long among the stars. On the 7th cycle, just as the Oralis glided through the calm of a silver nebula, the alarm screamed once more. The lights flickered red, shadows trembling across the walls. Seraphine stood abruptly from her command chair, her pulse sharp and fast. Report. Gravitational anomaly detected, Majesty, shouted Alira from the console. It's pulling us toward the Vathar collapse. Eli, who'd been in the engineering bay, burst onto the bridge, breathless but composed. A black star, he muttered, scanning the readings. And it's hungry. The screen filled with light, not golden but devouring. The ship shuddered under the pull. Every system screamed overload. The Oralis was being dragged toward the star's dead heart. We can't break free, cried the navigator. Our thrusters are losing efficiency. Seraphine turned to Eli. Can you stabilize us? He looked at the data, then back at her. Not this time. Your thrusters are designed for precision, not desperation. Then what do? He took a breath. We make desperation work. Without waiting for permission, he sprinted for the lower decks. Seraphine followed, ignoring Alira's protests. Eli, she shouted as they ran through the shaking corridors. You can't face that gravity field alone. He shot her a half smile. You said that last time. They reached the core chamber. The once stable light now flickered wildly, bending under the gravitational stress. Energy cables snapped like whips, filling the air with ozone and fire. Eli climbed onto the maintenance platform, shouting over the roar. If we reverse the polarity of the fusion loops and cut every automatic limiter, we might punch through the gravity wave. Alira's voice crackled over the intercom. That's suicidal. You'll destabilize the core again. Yeah, Eli said, his eyes fierce. But at least it'll move. Seraphine grabbed his arm. There must be another way. He turned to her, his expression softening. There's always another way, until there isn't. The ship lurched again, throwing them both against the railing. Metal screamed. Seraphine fell, catching herself at the last moment. Eli steadied her, his arm wrapped around her shoulders. For a heartbeat, everything else disappeared. The alarms, the heat, the chaos. Just her breath against his chest, his pulse beating wildly beneath her hand. Then he pulled away. If I can time the ignition pulse, I can use the collapse's own pull to launch us clear. That's madness, she said, voice trembling. He grinned. I've been called worse. She watched him climb to the upper conduit where the plasma coils flared like molten rivers. His silhouette burned against the blinding light. You'll die, she cried. Eli looked back down at her. Then tell the universe I died doing what humans do best, refusing the odds. He slammed the final sequence. The reactor screamed, a blinding column of light surging upward. The deck shook violently. Alira's voice came through the speakers, panicked. Core destabilizing! We'll explode! But Eli's hands moved faster, flipping switches, rerouting lines, coaxing the chaos to dance. He wasn't controlling the machine. He was listening to it, guiding it through madness, then silence. Sudden perfect stillness. The screen above showed the impossible, the Auralis breaking free from the black star's pull, soaring out of the collapsing gravity well like a phoenix from ash. The crew erupted into stunned disbelief. But Seraphine didn't cheer. She was staring at the platform where the human had fallen motionless beside the console. Eli, she screamed, running forward. The light from the core had dimmed, leaving only the faint hum of survival. She knelt beside him, shaking his shoulders. His pulse flickered faintly under her fingertips. Don't you dare, she whispered, her voice cracking. Don't you dare leave me now. His eyelids fluttered. Told you. We'd make it. Tears shimmered in her eyes, breaking through the composure that had always defined her. You stubborn, impossible human, she whispered. You saved us again, he smiled weakly. Just fixing things. She pressed her forehead to his, closing her eyes. Then fix yourself next. Around them, the Auralis drifted quietly through the nebula, alive once more, scarred but free. The stars glimmered outside like silent witnesses, and as Seraphine cradled the injured human in her arms, she realized something she had never understood until that moment. Perfection was not what saved civilizations. Love was. The medical bay of the Auralis was quiet. Too quiet. Machines hummed softly, the light dim and gentle as if the ship itself was holding its breath. On the central bed lay Eli Rowan, pale but breathing. His hands, still bandaged from the plasma burns, twitched faintly, as if he were reaching for tools that weren't there. Princess Seraphine hadn't left his side in 3 cycles. Her royal duties were passed to her aides, her reports left unfinished. She sat in silence beside him, watching the slow rhythm of his chest rise and fall. Each breath was a fragile miracle. Alira entered once, her crystalline voice low. Your Highness, the Council requests your report. They're asking why you risked. I'll answer them when he wakes, Seraphine said softly, eyes never leaving Eli. Not before. Alira hesitated. You've changed, Majesty. Seraphine looked at the unconscious human, then back at her aide. Perhaps I've simply remembered what it means to feel. When the door closed, Seraphine reached out, brushing her fingers across Eli's wrist. Gentle, careful. His pulse was weak, but there. You shouldn't have come back for us, she whispered. You could have lived. You could have gone home. His eyes fluttered open. Would have missed the view, he murmured, voice hoarse but steady. Seraphine froze and then smiled, tears breaking loose before she could stop them. You, impossible creature. He blinked at her, disoriented but smiling faintly. You've been crying? I don't cry, she said quickly, though her voice betrayed her. He chuckled weakly. You do now. She lowered her head, unable to hide the warmth flooding her chest. You changed us, Eli. You changed me. He tried to sit up, but she stopped him, placing a hand on his shoulder. Rest, she said softly. He obeyed, but his gaze stayed fixed on her. You know, he whispered. Back on Earth, we used to say every scar has a story. Guess I've collected a few out here. She smiled through her tears. Then wear them proudly. You earned everyone. Silence settled. Soft, peaceful, human, Then in a voice quieter than starlight, she said, "Eli, before you I thought strength meant being unbreakable, but now I see. Strength is when you keep going after you break." He nodded faintly. "That's the secret of being human. We don't stay broken." For the first time, she reached for his hand, not out of pity, not out of gratitude, but something deeper. "You once told me machines breathe," she whispered. "That they listen. Maybe I finally understand." He smiled, turning his hand to gently hold hers. "And what do they say?" "That they need care," she said softly. "Not commands." They stayed like that, two worlds touching in silence. Outside, the stars drifted past like quiet witnesses to something far greater than technology. Connection. Hours passed before Seraphine spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper.
"Eli, what will you do when we reach our homeworld?"
"They'll want to celebrate you, to study you." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I don't know. I'm not sure I belong anywhere anymore. Not Earth, not here." Her eyes softened. "Then stay. With us, with me." The words hung between them. Fragile, unguarded, true. Eli's heartbeat quickened under her touch. "Princess, your world runs on logic. I'm chaos wrapped in skin." "Perhaps," she said, her voice trembling. "We need a little chaos to remind us we're alive." He smiled, tired, genuine, and full of that same quiet humanity that had changed her entire empire. "Then maybe," he whispered, "we can fix each other." The ship's lights dimmed softly, like the heartbeat of something reborn. Outside the viewport, a distant sun rose over a field of starlight, casting a warm glow across them both. Seraphine rested her head gently beside his hand, eyes closing. "Sleep, human," she murmured. "The universe is safe for now." And as Eli drifted into dreams, one thought echoed through the corridors of the Oralis. Through every alloy and conduit he had touched, a human's warmth had done what machines never could. It had repaired more than systems. It had mended hearts. When the Oralis finally reached the homeworld of the Lumerians, the skies were painted in hues of rose gold and sapphire, a world alive with crystalline towers, floating bridges and rivers of glowing light. To Eli Rowan, it felt like stepping into a dream built from glass and melody. The alien city stretched endlessly, yet every surface shimmered as though greeting him, the human who had brought the unthinkable back to life. Crowds gathered. Thousands of Lumerians lined the arrival port, their luminous eyes filled with awe. Word had spread across the stars. The human engineer had repaired the unrepairable, not only a ship but the hearts of its people. Princess Seraphine stood beside him on the grand dais. Her long silver gown shimmered with the same starlight that had once framed their first meeting. Yet something in her had changed, her posture softer, her voice quieter, her eyes infinitely more human. The High Council approached, towering figures adorned in crystalline robes. One of them spoke, his tone formal and resonant. "Human Eli Rowan, the Princess of Lumeris, speaks highly of your courage and skill. Our records show no precedent. No being of flesh has ever entered the heart of a Lumerian core and survived. You have done the impossible." Eli bowed slightly, unsure of what to say. He felt every eye on him. His bandaged hands trembled slightly, though he tried to hide it. "I didn't do it alone," he said finally. "I just listened." A murmur swept through the crowd, a strange word for them, one they didn't often use. "Listened?" the elder asked. "Yes," Eli said. "Your ships, your machines, they talk in their own way. But so do your people. You just forgot how to hear them." Silence followed, deep and echoing. Then slowly the princess smiled. "He means," she said softly, "that sometimes the strongest repairs aren't made with tool, but with trust." The elder's crystalline form shimmered faintly, as if reflecting the truth of her words. "Then it seems," he said, "this human has not only repaired our ship but reminded us of our soul." Eli felt the world tilt around him. Applause, or the alien equivalent, a hum of harmonic resonance, filled the air like a song rising from every crystal tower. Yet amid the thunder of voices, his gaze stayed fixed on one figure, Seraphine, her expression serene yet full of something unnamed. Later that night, beneath the twin moons, they stood alone on a balcony overlooking the radiant city. The wind carried the scent of ozone and flowers. Below, the city pulsed with life, each light a heartbeat. Eli leaned on the railing, his hand still aching faintly. "You ever think," he said, That maybe the universe throws people together for a reason? Seraphine turned to him, her gaze thoughtful. Or perhaps it simply waits for the right kind of heart to see what others cannot. He smiled. That sounds like something you'd say before I messed up your perfect engine. She laughed, softly, musically. And yet you fixed it. You fixed all of us. He hesitated, his voice gentler now. I don't know what comes next. Earth's far away, and even if I could go back, you wouldn't be the same, she finished. Nor would we. For a long moment, they said nothing. The stars stretched above them, vast, endless, unknowable. Then Seraphine reached into the folds of her gown and pulled out something small, a crystal shard glowing faintly blue. This, she said, placing it in his palm, is from the Oralis's heart. You restored its pulse. Now it carries part of you. Eli looked down at it, light rippling through his fingers, and then up at her. And what about your heart? He asked quietly. Her gaze softened, shimmering like starlight on water. That, she whispered, you've already repaired. He didn't know what to say. Only that the silence that followed said everything words could not.